Of children from parents. We've received hundreds of emails over the course of the last year from parents complaining that Georgia's Division of Family and Children Services, DFACS, took their children without justification, or it's taken too long to get their children back once they are in the foster care system. Well, tonight we're going to look at whether those complaints are valid, starting with one family's much publicized story.
Put your hands out, stand, spin around twice. There we go. Now what?
This party's for the Red Power Ranger, a.k.a. Jackson Bortz.
Okay.
He's spinning straight into his 4th year, complete with birthday bash.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you.
Despite a large circle of friends and family celebrating, there is one member of the family missing, a little buddy, a brother.
To you.
His absence has ripped Jackson's world apart, shredded his safe haven. The Garden of Innocence in Roswell, a favorite red truck, a duck, and flowers mark a small space without a headstone.
Dylan, I nicknamed him Tiger, and we were talking about trying to find a headstone with a tiger on it for him.
Don and Rachel Bortz are mourning a son.
Dylan is in a safe place now.
Dylan Bortz was only 5 months old when something strange and unexpected happened to him in his crib. Don had laid him down to sleep on January 1st. An 18-year-old sister babysat after Don and Rachel separately left the house.
He had gone down for his nap, and he'd been down probably about an hour and a half, and my little sister went to go get him up from his nap and found him not breathing.
They called 911, paramedics responded, and Dylan was rushed to North Fulton Regional Hospital. Then he was life-flighted to Children's Healthcare of Atlanta at Scottish Rite.
They put him on life support and said, they were going to run some tests. At that point, the doctor said he thought it was SIDS.
But SIDS was not the only theory about Dylan. A cloud of suspicion began to form.
Can you explain to me at what point you suddenly began to feel that they weren't believing your story, that you were coming under suspicion?
Until they said that Jackson was going to be taken away from us, we had no idea. The doctor had been evasive. We had not been able to talk to him. Later found out that the charts had been sealed. The staff of the hospital was not allowed to talk to us.
The medical staff had contacted the Division of Family and Children Services. Police and a DFACS investigator questioned the Bortzes about Dylan's medical history, their living arrangements, their marriage, and the fact that Don was not Dylan's biological father. The Bortzes say a DFACS investigator later informed them they had taken custody of both their children, Dylan while on life support, Jackson at home.
They told us they were taking Jackson, and I was like, I don't understand. How is this normal for SIDS? Or I understand you have to do an investigation in SIDS or whatever. And one of the detectives made some offhanded remark about, well, this is no SIDS case or something. And at that point, it kind of registered, but I was also a little bit in shock.
But they wouldn't tell us what it was.
We're suspects.
Exactly. And we didn't even know what of. We had no clue what we were being suspected of.
As the Bortzes kept a vigil at the hospital, they eventually found out that Dylan had a skull fracture. They say they were first stunned by the news. Then
we both kind of realized, oh no, the fall.
The parents say the fall involved this vibrating baby seat nearly a week earlier, December 27th. Dylan's grandmother, Randy St. Dennis, reenacted how Rachel dropped the baby in the kitchen.
Jack ran by, and he pushed on this side of the counter, and he pushed on her leg at the knee and kneed her, and she collapsed like that. That's how he fell.
Dylan landed on his head but never lost consciousness. The family watched him closely the next few days, and he appeared fine. The family called it an accident, but DFACS records claimed it was non-accidental. In January, the director of DFACS, Mary Dean Harvey, spoke out about this case.
This kind of injury had to have been non-accidental. The force that it takes to deliver that kind of injury to a child's skull.
You felt like you were being convicted without having a trial, without having any evidence?
Absolutely. We kept giving them anything we could think of that to get them to say, well, okay, maybe, you know, we jumped to a conclusion. They didn't want to hear it. They didn't want to see it. They didn't care. They, even up until last week, they did x-rays on Jackson last week and took him for another doctor's exam and did full body x-rays, and they're still looking for something. But it's so silly.
But Rachel and Don received a report in February that they said proved they were telling the truth.
You're both convinced that the dropping of the baby, the hitting of the head on the floor, did not cause his death?
No, and the medical examiners come out and said that that had nothing to do with it.
In February, the Fulton County Medical Examiner autopsy report labeled Dylan's cause of death unexpected and undetermined. It listed brain swelling, retinal hemorrhages, and a skull fracture, but said the skull fracture and soft tissues indicate a vigorous healing response at least several days old. It also noted that the findings usually observed in the so-called shaken infant syndrome were absent. The Roswell Police Department closed its investigation into Dylan's death, pending any further information. But Jackson remained in DFAC's custody.
You feel you've been cleared, but still you don't have young Jackson. What about that?
It's so frustrating. You would think that our judicial system, our family court system, as soon as they understand that there is no case, that they would take tremendous care to not only release a prisoner out of jail, but even more so, release a small child out of his situation and back into a home and not make him suffer any longer. You would think that they would act more quickly.
The Bortzes launched a very public campaign to get Jackson back. They created a sophisticated Save Jackson Bortz website.
We are collecting stories of families who have said they have been harmed by lack of due process by DFACs around the state of Georgia.
Bring Jackson home! Bring Jackson home!
Friends of the Bortzes also held a rally in January in front of the Fulton County Juvenile Court.
How difficult was it for you to go public, to launch this battle, knowing that your story was going to be all over the media?
It was extremely difficult for me to make that decision. I waited, I prayed on it, I thought long and hard about it, until finally I realized if I'm going to lose my child, I'm going to lose him either way. I need to fight, and I need other people to see that they can fight too.
What's the reaction been like?
Mixed. I never knew there were so many families who had issues with DFACs. I mean, literally coming out of, it's frightening.
It's very scary.
And they are really coming out of the woodwork.
I'll see you tomorrow.
Jackson has remained in DFAC's custody 3 months, a relatively short time compared to other families the Bortzes have met with similar circumstances.
Come here.
The strain is apparent when he has to leave his regular home to go with his uncle. DFACs has moved him several times. He was initially with a foster family for 4 days, then placed with Don's parents.
It's time to go. Okay, come on. Open.
But a dispute with DFACs over Don and Rachel staying overnight led him to be moved again. He spent another 3 weeks with foster parents until he was finally moved to an uncle's home. Rachel and Don now have liberal access to him.
Do you fear that this episode could have permanent impact on Jackson?
I pray that it will not have a permanent impact on him. If DFACs returns him quickly, but he is very sad. He's having a hard time understanding why he can't come home. He asks every day, he says, "Grandma, when can I come home? I want to come home. The judge is taking too long." Sadly, he runs and hides now if he sees a police car. He pointed to the policeman and he said, "You scary."
Green.
His fear is balanced by good times.
I love green. Green is my favorite color.
Look at my fingers.
This resilient child's world has been as mixed up as the paints he plays in. While he appears carefree, his parents say he acts out and has frequent nightmares.
Give me an idea of the toll this is taking on you, the two of you.
We can't grieve. It's an inconvenience in all forms. We have not been able to sleep well. We can't grieve for our other son. We want to be able to grieve as a family. We want our son back.
So is their complaint reflective of only a few families, or is it a much bigger problem? We'll put that into perspective coming up.
Next, on Action News Primetime. How often does it really happen that DFACS removes children from their parents? And what's at stake? Plus, why these parents level such criticism at DFACS door.
They are a dangerous entity.
Turn to Action News Primetime with John Pruitt.
8 years ago, a child named Terrell Peterson was beaten and starved to death. The case was so horrific that it sparked national outrage. DFACS had left the child in a home where agencies had heard abuse allegations. DFACS can become the target of criticism when it doesn't remove or does remove a child. This heart-wrenching scene occurred 5 years ago. 49 children seized from their families who belong to the House of Prayer. DFACS and Atlanta police removed them after allegations of child abuse. A pastor and 4 other church members would later be convicted of cruelty to children. While most child removals are not as confrontational, they are traumatic. It's often a difficult call for DFACS investigators.
It's a very hard decision that any of them make to say, I've got to take these children into the state's care. I can tell you right now, it's the last thing they want to do when they go out. They don't want to have to bring another child into care. That means a lot more work for the department.
So how often does DFACS remove children from homes? DFACS says it's investigated more than 72,000 reports of child abuse or neglect last year. Of those, only 37% of the cases were substantiated. DFACS says it removed approximately 5,000 children from homes. A major underlying reason, families involved with substance abuse.
Cocaine, alcohol abuse are, I would say, 80% or higher of the cases, you will find that that is a factor.
Dee Sims is the director of the Office of the Child Advocate, an agency that investigates about 500 to 600 complaints a year against DFACS.
We get lots of calls in the Office of the Child Advocate from families that are complaining about their children having been removed for no reason. It is the rare exception for the Office of the Child Advocate to then go in and do an investigation and actually find that there was no reason for the removal of the children. What we do see at times are cases where maybe the decision to remove could have gone either way, and they've made that decision because the parents haven't cooperated with them.
But that message is hard to swallow for this crowd at the state capitol.
My husband was accused of being gay and watching gay pornography, and they said that I had bipolar disorder. There was no truth to it whatsoever.
Many of these parents claim they cooperated or didn't cooperate and still had their children taken unjustifiably.
DFACS, they're a terrorist organization, literally. They terrorize families.
This group supports what it calls the Family Reclamation Movement, a national movement calling for an investigation into the foster care system.
It has been stated in the court that taking your child away and terminating a parent's rights is equal to a death sentence for a family.
Randy St. Dennis spoke at the rally. She's fighting to get her grandson, Jackson Bortz, out of state custody. She believes legislators need to pass new laws, lifting a veil from those who usually have immunity.
In Georgia, if your neighbor gets angry at you, if they can think up a big enough lie, they can tell it maliciously enough, your children can be removed from your home with no recourse of knowing who did that to you. We need to make the people who make the complaints accountable if they're later found to be incorrect.
You're saying if a teacher recognizes what she or may think is abuse in a child and reports it, if that report turns out to be inaccurate in terms of abuse actually occurring, that teacher could be sued?
Yes, and a doctor who makes a false statement.
Doctors, teachers, and police officers are considered mandatory reporters, people required by law to report suspicions of child abuse or neglect. 64% of reports in Georgia come from them. Of the 87,000 annual abuse allegations, DFAC says it quickly screens out about 15,000 of them. They investigate the remaining 72,000 cases, but only about 37% are substantiated. That means almost 2/3 of the accusations are unsubstantiated.
Do I want to do anything to discourage people from reporting abuse and neglect when they see children in danger? I don't want to do that, because I think we have problems in getting people to step up and report things that they see now.
A woman who's felt the effects of such reports is Dorothy Kernaghan-Baez, an Augusta resident who says she was reported 3 times by an angry relative and each time investigated by DFACs.
The first accusation that we had, I was accused of not feeding my new baby because I supposedly wanted him to die. And I was interrogated for 2.5 hours about things having nothing to do with that. You know, and when I questioned, you know, where is all this going? Well, if you don't cooperate, it'll go badly for you. We'll take your children.
Dorothy says DFACs never removed her 2 children, but by the 3rd allegation, she was so stressed that she had bleeding ulcers and only weighed 90 pounds. She believes so-called pseudo-abuse, unsubstantiated allegations of child abuse and neglect, is prevalent in Georgia.
There are so many subjective little areas. For example, and this isn't a Georgia case, but it's just a hoot to me, a woman was substantiated for neglect for giving her daughter a honey bun for breakfast. It might not be the most nutritious breakfast, but I mean, come on the big scheme of things, you know, you want to say this is neglect?
Some cases are quickly dismissed here in juvenile court. 72 hours after a child is removed, both sides are able to present evidence.
DFACs can substantiate a case for abuse or neglect by their own definitions that does not meet a standard for criminal prosecution.
Wow. That's just one of the reasons the Boertzes are pushing for juvenile court proceedings in Georgia to be opened to the public. At least 17 other states have passed similar laws. And they believe police should solely handle child abuse investigations, not DFACs.
The girl who did our initial investigation, it was her very first investigation. She had never done an investigation before. And then it got transferred to a caseworker who continued the initial investigation. The investigations, the evidence gathering, the police need to be handling this. We don't need,
not only are they performing their own investigation, but they also pay no attention to what the other investigators are saying. They don't care. They have an agenda.
Coming up next on Action News Primetime, DFAC's director replies to the criticism.
I don't think our job is to presume innocence or guilt. Our job is to assess risk.
Action News Primetime with John Pruitt is a family-to-family special. Brought to you by Haverty's Furniture.
15,000 Georgia children are in foster care, about the same number when WSB-TV started examining foster care last year. But there are changes. There are 500 new caseworkers. Case loads have dropped, and there is new leadership at the helm of DFACs.
Mary Dean Harvey is the new face at DFACs. She's the 5th DFACs director in Georgia in the past 10 years. Once heading Nebraska's Department of Social Services, Harvey recognizes she has a big job ahead of her here.
When you hear your organization described as Gestapo-like, that your workers are terroristic, how does that make you feel?
It certainly doesn't make me feel very proud, but I understand the source of those kind of comments. Simply, and I know it does not reflect our work or our workers. Rather, it reflects a citizen who was on the receiving end, probably, of our actions. We Americans have that independent spirit. I can do it myself, and I don't need intrusion. The very nature of our work is intrusive, oftentimes.
Do you feel you're unfairly accused?
Of course, I feel we're unfairly accused. But as I said to you, I understand, you know, the source of those kinds of feelings.
Let's snatch a child like Jackson Bortz out of a perfectly good home.
While parents have emotionally charged stories criticizing DFACS for taking their children, Harvey points to the facts. 72,000 investigations with fewer than 5,000 children removed.
To remove a child from a home is a draconian measure. What criteria do you follow before you will remove a child?
Well, first of all, I'd say that removal of a child is not a draconian measure. The removal of a child is only done when we believe that the child is in imminent danger. That is when that child is removed. If we had to run the risk of making a mistake, if our choices are to receive negative criticism or leave a child in danger, we'll take the negative criticism.
And you've had your share?
Yes, we have.
Harvey says that DFACS workers are increasingly being cross-trained with law enforcement.
So you feel your workers are fully qualified to do these sorts of investigations, even when a child might be removed from the home?
Yes, I do. We have made concerted efforts to train workers. First of all, a little over a year ago, we put in a new set of qualifications for people to perform this kind of work. And we do rigorous training with them and retraining and updated training. And we always recognize that we can improve practice, which is why, as an enterprise, do we get it right all the time? No, we don't. But are we trying to perfect it and to get it right? Yes, we are.
DFACS maintains the majority of children removed from home, 75%, are reunited with their families in less than 12 months. While permanency is a goal,
certainly it is the most desirable thing for us to achieve reunification, because that's where that child spent the first formative years. That's where the psyche has been grounded.
Got it? Yeah. I got it.
Doing a good job.
we ask about the fate of Jackson Bortz, the 4-year-old removed 3 months ago after the death of his infant brother.
When is this going to end?
I don't know. I can't tell you when that is going to end. I'm not even intimately familiar with the circumstances of that case right now.
You have not delved into this case, even though it's been so much in the news, such a cause celeb among certain people. I mean, really,
know,
you haven't delved into this case?
I know as much as I need to know. With regards to where the child, the surviving child, is now, I don't know. I trust that those folk who handle that know where that is. I don't need to know where that is. I do, however, I have looked at our practice, what we did in that. I've examined everything that we did, and I support everything that was done.
There's been no finding of abuse, and the child is still not with his parents.
I cannot respond to that.
Harvey often cannot speak in detail about such cases because of confidentiality rules.
Rachel and Don Bortz claim DFACS stole the last hours they had with their son Dylan. Just hours before Dylan was taken off life support, they say they were forced into leaving the hospital and attending a DFACS meeting about their other son, Jackson.
I'm having this phone conversation in the room with Dylan, pleading with her, let us stay with him. We only have a few hours left with him. She didn't hear it.
She wasn't gonna accept that.
The Bortzes claimed they were bullied by DFACS, a claim some others make as well.
I know I was treated like complete garbage. I've seen other parents treated like garbage.
Dorothy Kernaghan-Baez decided to create an advocacy group for families falsely accused of child abuse. It's called Georgia Family Rights. Her advice, if DFACS ever knocks on the door?
I always tell families never, ever have a conversation with them without it being recorded. DFACS does not have the right to enter your home without a court order. Period. Paragraph.
But DFACS Director Mary Dean Harvey says a caseworker's critical first step is to assess risk in a reported case of child abuse or neglect.
We knock to gather information, and that's where I'm coming from. We will have a warrant if we have come for the purpose of removing children. But 9 times out of 10, we are responding to a call that we got, and we must investigate. We must ask questions. We must gather information. We must talk to the family. I would be very cooperative. As a matter of fact, I would want them to know all of the facts that they are seeking information about. And I would actually engage them in the process of saying, if there is an issue, what can you do to help me?
Harvey also says a new program called Diversion has helped 17,000 families stay together. The program provides services and support to families and has dramatically lowered caseloads.
Now for an update on the Bortz's case. Rachel and Dawn went to Fulton County Juvenile Court today for a hearing to find out if Jackson would go home or remain in state custody. Inside the courtroom, the judge denied a motion to dismiss the case, so testimony was heard from both sides. The hearing continues tomorrow. This family says regardless of the decision, they will continue their fight to change the child welfare system.
I've said before that this does not end when Jackson comes home.
Until all this started, it's a fight we didn't know existed and didn't know we were ever going to be part of.
I'm sorry to sound cliche, it is very much a war on terror in our own backyards.
These stories from both parents and the state often have many layers, and confidentiality rules prevent having a complete picture. We do thank you for joining us tonight to look at these controversial issues. Good night.